The soldiers are eating out of a damn helmet.
Bon appétit, bro.
This helmet was worn by a Russian soldier who died recently. Now his friends are using it as a plate, laughing while eating soggy noodles. One of them makes a joke about roasting the helmet owner's thigh to make noodles with meat. That's harsh. They recorded this themselves.
Pasta and meat.
Human meat.
I'm out.
Meanwhile, Putin promises on television that his soldiers earn $29,000 and have the best conditions in the world. No, this scene isn't an accident. It's the visible symptom of something much bigger that's destroying the Russian army from the inside out. What I'm going to show you now is the reality that Putin can no longer hide. This video you just saw wasn't leaked by Ukrainians. It was recorded and published by the Russian soldiers themselves. They're exposing their own conditions in the trenches, and while they're making these morbid jokes, they're also doing something even more disturbing. They warn other Russians not to trust the Ministry of Defense. They say everything is a lie. High salaries, the food, decent conditions, it's all false. And this helmet? Well, it represents something much bigger. First, regarding supplies, there aren't even plates, lunchboxes, or anything to heat up food. Nothing. Second, regarding health, that helmet is dirty. There's sweat, hair, and possibly blood from the fallen soldier. Whoever eats there will get sick, will have severe diarrhea, and a sick soldier can't fight. The worst part is the psychological aspect. That helmet belonged to a friend who was alive just hours ago, making jokes, talking, and now it became a plate. The dead lost their humanity and became merely useful. The soldiers themselves make horrible jokes while they eat. This is the moment when the Russian army completely lost its moral sense. Now notice something important here. It wasn't the Ukrainians who did this to these soldiers. The Ukrainians don't control Russian logistics. They're not the ones who decide whether food reaches the trenches or not. That's the responsibility of Moscow, the Kremlin, the Russian state itself. The enemy of these men isn't on the other side of the front line. He's sitting in offices in Moscow. But why would soldiers get to this point? Why use a dead friend's helmet to eat? The answer lies in a word you wouldn't expect to hear about a modern army. Abandonment. These soldiers aren't in organized military bases. They don't have working communication, and there's no troop rotation. They're in what witnesses call the pit. A hole in the ground where civilization has ended, just isolated holes. The soldiers' world is limited to that trench. Beyond it, there's only mud and silence. This soldier with the helmet isn't an isolated case. There are other videos, other confessions. A Russian soldier appears on screen with his leg shattered by a Ukrainian first-person view drone.
So many bodies on the road. Something messed up my leg. A grenade from a drone or a first-person view drone. I don't know. It's been a week already. Damn. I want to eat something.
He's stuck in a trench, abandoned, and when they ask him who his biggest enemy is, he doesn't say the Ukrainians, he says hunger and misery.
I hope someone sees this video. I hope. I don't know. I'm not sure what to do. The radio's dead. I can't contact anyone, and I have little food or water. There isn't any water. This damn 5th unit. Those shitty commanders, these damn Ukrainians.
This man admits he hasn't seen food for a week. A week? He hasn't seen water either. His radios are cut off, no contact with command, no chance of rescue. The only sound on the radio frequencies is silence. He realized something terrible. He's no longer a soldier, he's someone who has been left to die. Yes, the drone that hit his leg was Ukrainian, but who left him without food for a week? Who cut off his communications? Who abandoned him there to rot? It wasn't the Ukrainians, it was the Russian army itself. Consider that for a moment. Going without water for more than 3 days is extremely dangerous. A week without water, The body starts to shut down. Kidney failure occurs, causing the person to hallucinate. And they still expect him to fight like this. But let's be direct here. When you're so hungry that you don't even care about the enemy's gunfire anymore, you're no longer a soldier, you're just someone trying not to starve to death. Military experts call this a total logistics collapse, but that's too technical. What's really happening is simple. The Russian army can no longer do the basics. It can't feed its soldiers. And here's the scariest part. This isn't just incompetence, it's intentional, it's a strategy. Because while the soldiers are starving in the trenches, the Kremlin is waging another war, a war against its own army. And the weapon in this war? Vodka. Let me explain it to you. Historically, vodka has always been essential for the Russian army. It's what gives soldiers courage when they're freezing in trenches at minus 20 degrees. It's what gets them drunk enough to forget their fear and attack. For decades, the Russian government has used alcohol to control its soldiers, keeping them drunk enough to obey. But now, in January 2026, the Russian Ministry of Finance is going to raise the minimum price of vodka by 17%. A half-liter bottle will cost 409 rubles. Other spirits like cognac and whiskey will go up by 28%. And you might be thinking, well, it's just a normal price increase, inflation. No, it's not. Look, the Ukrainians aren't raising the price of vodka. The Ukrainians don't have any power over the Russian economy. Who's doing this? Putin. The Russian leader himself is taxing the only comfort his soldiers still have. The Russian Ministry of Finance is facing a budget deficit of 5.7 trillion rubles in 2025. It's one of the largest in the country's history. And to try to cover this gap, the Kremlin decided to tax the only comfort the soldiers still have. Putin is literally punishing his own men to balance the budget, but here's the problem. When you raise the price of official vodka too much, people don't stop drinking, they buy counterfeit alcohol, illegal alcohol, contaminated alcohol that can kill. And Russian experts are already warning. The president of the Alcopro Association, Andrei Moskovsky, made it clear, soldiers who earn little will buy illegal alcohol. But the crisis doesn't stop at the price of vodka, it explodes in the soldiers' bank accounts. Russia has built a mercenary army. At least that's what they said. Putin promised very high salaries to attract men to the front line. 2.6 million rubles per contracted soldier, approximately $29,000. That was the promise, but now those promises have turned into bounce checks. The finance minister of Yakutia, a republic in the far east of Russia, officially admitted that payments to soldiers have been suspended. The reason? Lack of resources in the budget. They simply don't have the money. And it's not just Yakutia. Regions like Tatarstan, Chuvashia, Mariel, and Samara were forced to cut the 2 million ruble bonuses to just 400,000 rubles, an 80% reduction. Ukrainian military intelligence reports that Russian regions can't even meet 40% of the recruitment targets set by Moscow. Pay attention to this. The Ukrainians didn't steal this money. The Ukrainians don't control the Russian budget. Who promised these salaries but didn't pay? Moscow. Who cut the bonuses by 80%? The Russian government itself. This isn't war, this is fraud. The Russian state is deceiving its own soldiers. The calculation is simple. No money, soldiers, food, morale, vodka, or anesthesia. What happened here was a fundamental change. These men are no longer mercenaries. They're not fighting for the money they were promised, because the money never comes. They've become slaves. They're dying for wages they'll never receive. And when that salary doesn't come, when vodka gets too expensive, when there's no food, what remains isn't loyalty, it's anger, and that's where the real danger lies. Hunger and poverty don't just weaken an army, they can turn soldiers into an angry mob. And that anger can make them turn their weapons against the one who's supposed to be their leader. And when you take all those things away from an armed man who's dying in a trench, what do you think happens? He deserts. And there are quite a few. Since the beginning of the invasion of Ukraine, at least 50,000 Russian soldiers have deserted. 50,000. That's equivalent to several entire divisions that simply vanished. In the Central Military District, more than 25,000 soldiers and officers deserted in just 9 months. As Yevgeny Kochagin, head of the DOR observation group based in Volgograd, pointed out, these men are not fleeing because they are pacifists or anti-war activists. They are fleeing because they want to survive. The moment they realize they will be sent as meat for the grinder, that they will never get out of those muddy trenches alive, they run without looking back. But there is something even more serious happening, because out of those 50,000 soldiers who deserted the army, many of them fled taking their weapons and equipment with them. They have become armed criminal groups within Russia itself. Trained soldiers, armed and deeply betrayed by their own government, are now an internal threat. They all turned their backs on the Russian government, and the Kremlin knows it. So they went back to using old methods from Stalin's era, placing Russian soldiers behind the front lines. The mission of these soldiers is to shoot any other Russian soldier who tries to flee or retreat. Think about that. Russians shooting at Russians, it's not the Ukrainians doing that. The Russian commanders are the ones giving that order. If an army must shoot its own soldiers to prevent them from fleeing, it has already lost. The real enemy is now within. In November, the 95th Airborne Brigade intercepted a disturbing radio communication. A Russian soldier was begging the command. The commander took my ration card. I haven't seen my payment. I ran away twice. They bring us back and force us to march along the same path. Don't serve here. The horror goes beyond that. There are reports of a commander named Komori who sent his men into an area full of dead soldiers' bodies. But before the attack, he took all their bank cards and pins. Did you get that? While he was sending his soldiers to certain death, he was planning to steal their salaries. That's not the behavior of a soldier, that's the behavior of a criminal, of a gang, and it doesn't end in the trenches. The Kremlin brought this war into the soldiers' homes. Intelligence reports that the Russian secret services are using threats against the families of deserters. Mothers, wives, and children are being threatened to force their husbands and sons to return to the front line. If all this is true, the Russian state is literally waging war against its own people. Another disturbing case happened in the Leningrad region, where 9 Russian prisoners who were being transported to the front line shot and killed the driver of the vehicle and deserted. Now the soldiers aren't just fleeing, they're also destroying the system that sends them. Let's reflect on what we've seen so far. Russian soldiers eating from the helmets of the dead, Russian soldiers without food for a week, Russian soldiers paying more for the vodka they need to withstand the cold, Russian soldiers not receiving the promised salaries, 50,000 soldiers deserting, Russian soldiers being shot by other Russian soldiers when they try to retreat. Do you see the pattern? The Russian army is not being destroyed by the Ukrainians, it is being destroyed by Russia itself, from the inside out. The Ukrainian General Staff reports Russian military casualties have exceeded 1,178,610, and remember, that's just the tip of the iceberg. This list includes 12 generals and 6,013 officers. When an army loses so many commanders at this speed, what remains is chaos. It's an army without leadership. And the losses aren't just human. 11,396 tanks destroyed, 23,686 armored vehicles lost, 34,843 artillery systems eliminated, military analysts estimate that it will take decades for Russia to replace this equipment. Decades. But no tank, no armored vehicle, and definitely no modified pigeon can replace the soldier who is starving, with his leg blown off and a radio that doesn't work. Modified pigeon? Yes, you heard that right. Unable to find human soldiers and unable to feed the ones they do find. Russia is now trying to use bomber pigeons. A technology company called Neri is trying to turn pigeons into remotely controlled living bombs by putting electrodes in their brains. After the attempts with whales and dolphins, now pigeons are being recruited for Putin's war. This isn't innovation, it's the desperation of a regime that has lost touch with reality. When a superpower that has lost 1 million soldiers looks for salvation by putting chips in birds' brains, you can see things have gotten bad for them. Yes. Ukraine is battling. Yes, Ukrainians are resisting, but the real destruction of the Russian army? Well, that is coming from within, from the Kremlin itself, from Moscow's own decisions. Now I want to know your opinion. In your view, what will collapse first, the Russian army on the front line or the internal system that sustains this war? Leave your answer in the comments. If this content gave you a perspective you hadn't seen before, share this video and subscribe to the channel for more in-depth analyses about what's really happening in the world. Thank you for watching. See you next time.